Well, Hurricane Irma is currently between Cuba and the Bahamas. It's projected to hit Florida in the next 2 days. The storm carries winds of up to 150 miles an hour. It has already ripped through several Caribbean islands. CBS News weather producer David Parkinson joins us now with the latest. Okay, David, where is the storm going? What's the latest on the path?
So the latest on the path, as it has continued to evolve over the past day or so, is that it is trending a little bit farther westward with each successive run. So the National Hurricane Center has now put out that they're expecting a landfall in the Florida Keys, and then it's going to move up the central part of the state and then kind of move on off into Georgia and parts of Tennessee. So the good news is those folks in South Carolina along the coast, those folks in North Carolina along the coast are under less of a threat. I don't want to completely clear them just yet because storms can change. But for right now, you can see how much of a behemoth this storm is. That colorful area where you've got the tropical storm force winds, that's 500 miles across, over 500 miles across.
Wow.
The clouds on both sides, that reaches over 1,000 miles across.
That's incredible.
This storm is enormous, and it has only gotten larger overnight. So even as the winds have come down, the wind field has expanded. So it is no less dangerous than it was yesterday.
Yesterday, you talked about how it was going up the spine of the state, right down the middle. Is that still the case? Who do you think will be hardest hit in Florida?
That is still the case. So right now, we're looking like the storm's going to kind of go up US 27, if you will, and then kind of follow along the Florida's Turnpike once you get to Orlando. So what that means is everyone on the right side of the storm, that's the front right quadrant of the storm, that's the worst part of the storm. So that puts Miami in it.
Yeah, we see it right on the screen right now.
Right, yeah. Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach, Jacksonville, Daytona, all of those folks are on the worst side of the storm. That being said, we now really have to start worrying about places like Naples and Fort Myers and Sarasota, where you have storm surge coming on the back bays. So essentially the winds are coming counterclockwise around the storm, and then what happens is all of this water gets pushed out into the bay, and so you get back bay flooding. So you're not necessarily getting ocean flooding in that round, you're getting back bay flooding. So that'll flood in one direction, and then as the storm moves out, you've got the water piling in from the Gulf. So essentially, you can't win in that Gulf area. So that's why we've got those evacuations starting in Southwest Florida and even in the Tampa area.
You know, as it moves towards the west, the trajectory right now, people are like, well, we're not in the eye of the storm, so we're clear. True.
No. So, I mean, that's the thing. So the tropical storm force winds on this storm extend 210 miles in each direction.
Okay.
And so that means you have sustained winds of 40 miles an hour and gusts higher for 200 miles in either direction of the center of the storm. That is quadruple the size of Florida in a lot of places.
Quadruple,
right. So Alligator Alley is about 100 miles across. Yep. So 4 times that is your wind field there. Wow. So just because the eye of the storm isn't passing over you does not mean you're going to be not going to be seeing damaging winds. And what you really need to pay attention to is if you're in an area that's on the outskirts of that, still bring in all of your furniture, secure things from projectiles, batten things down, so that way you don't have anything. All it takes is a freak gust to really cause some damage.
I know folks in Florida who are already freezing water because they're worried about water. They can't buy water in some places. I want to ask you, you were watching Harvey before it made landfall. How does this storm compare to what you saw leading up to Harvey?
I feel like people are a little bit better prepared for the storm. I feel like people saw Harvey and they said, okay, we need to act. And that's a good thing. I mean, this is a storm that South Florida has not seen in at least 25 years when you compare it to Andrew, and perhaps even never. This could be worse in terms of total damage because it's covering the whole state. So that, I think, is a positive thing. I want to make sure that people are still understanding, and we need to be clear. Oh, there's your comparison.
You see right here, you see Hurricane Andrew on your left from 1992, Irma. I mean, just look at it. You can tell how much more massive Irma is to Andrew.
Right. You can fit several Andrews inside of Irma.
Wow.
And so Andrew crossed the state. It basically followed Alligator Alley, give or take, across the state. It didn't go all the way up the state. So there were places that dodged the bullet, so to speak, on Andrew. We haven't had a storm take this kind of track in a very long time, so people need to understand that this is a serious wind threat and a serious storm surge threat, the likes of which Florida hasn't seen. And so hopefully they're not thinking back to Harvey where it was all this rain. Yes, there will be a lot of rain, but the big concern is still that wind and that storm surge.
Do you get the sense, David, it's going to continue to be a Cat 4, or will it weaken?
So the area that it's got left to run into Florida there is some of the warmest water it has encountered to date. Okay. It's 30 degrees Celsius, 86 degrees Fahrenheit. It could not be more ideal for there to be a hurricane.
Okay.
So up until it hits Florida, I don't expect it to weaken at all. It may strengthen a couple miles an hour. doesn't really matter as it approaches the state. As it goes over more and more land, the Everglades, it's not going to lose too much steam over because there's so much water in the Everglades. But once you get over drier land, it will start to weaken. We're looking at a Category 2 or a Category 1 as it approaches the northern part of the state. And then as you move into Georgia and over the Atlanta area, it's now down to a tropical depression. So you've taken out a lot of the wind threat to it, but it is still a serious storm until it peters itself out, probably in the Tennessee River Valley.
Incredible. When you're talking about just, this isn't it that we're watching. I mean, you've got Hurricane Jose. Is that correct?
Right. Oh, yeah. You're looking at 3 hurricanes right now. So there's the satellite. All the way on the left, that's Katia. That's being dealt with in Mexico, so we don't have to worry about that. Then you've got Irma, that's the big one in the center, and then over on the right, that is Jose. Jose is a Category 4 storm. It's a much smaller storm, but it is forecast to go near some of the same places, Barbuda, the Virgin Islands, that basically don't have any safe shelters left, so they really need to watch out for that, and that's going to be over the next day or two. And then the issue with Jose is it's going to kind of get bottled up by all of this that's going on with our storm in Florida, and so it's going to kind of sit over the Atlantic, and we think it will clear itself out and avoid a landfall, but it's so far out, nothing can be discounted, and we need to keep watching it, and we will, but our eyes are right now on Irma, at least through the weekend.
Meteorologists have earned their paycheck this month.
I think so.
And it's only a few days in as well. David Parkinson, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks.